Welcome to Sinister States.
I never thought I'd end up working nights in places most people wouldn't step foot in during the day. My name's Alex, and I'm what you might call a freelance cleaner, though that's just a polite way of saying I take the jobs nobody else wants. I didn't plan on this line of work. I used to have a regular job, a regular life, a regular apartment with a view of the city and a cat that waited for me at the door. But life has a way of unraveling, one thread at a time, until you're left holding the pieces and wondering how you got here. It started after the layoffs. The company folded, the severance was barely enough to cover rent for a month, and the job market was a graveyard of entry-level positions that somehow required 5 years of experience. I tried everything: temp agencies, night shifts at warehouses, even a stint as a rideshare driver. But nothing stuck. The bills kept coming, and the city didn't care if you were tired or scared or just plain unlucky. That's when I got the first call. No caller ID, just a voice on the other end, low and calm, asking if I was available for a cleaning job. The pay was double what I'd made before, cash in hand, no questions asked. The only catch: the job was at St. Augustine's Hospital, abandoned for over a decade, and I'd be working alone. I should have said no. I should have hung up and blocked the number. But desperation is a powerful motivator, and fear of eviction is stronger than fear of the unknown. The first night, I drove out to the edge of the city, past the last working streetlight, down a road that turned from asphalt to gravel to dirt. St. Augustine's loomed out of the darkness, a hulking mass of brick and broken windows, its sign half-hanging, letters faded to ghosts. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown, weeds pushing up through the concrete like the earth was trying to reclaim what was left. My hands shook as I killed the engine and stepped out, the air thick with the smell of rain and rust. There was a note taped to the front door, my name written in block letters. Inside the envelope, a key, a flashlight, a map of the hospital's first floor, and a list of rules. 6 rules, typed in the same blocky font, each one underlined. I read them twice before I even unlocked the door. Rule 1, never enter the children's ward after midnight. Rule 2, if you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. Rule 3, the elevator is never to be used, no matter what you hear. Rule 4, if you see a light on in room 304, leave the building immediately. Rule 5, do not answer if someone knocks on the staff lounge door. Rule 6, always finish your work before sunrise. I laughed, a short, nervous sound that echoed off the empty lot. It had to be a joke, some kind of initiation for new hires. But the pay was real, and the key fit the lock. The door groaned open, and I stepped inside. The air was colder than outside, heavy with the scent of old disinfectant and something sweeter, almost floral, that made my skin crawl. My footsteps echoed down the hallway, bouncing off peeling paint and shattered glass. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating faded murals of cartoon animals and rainbows, their colors bleached by time. The silence was absolute, the kind that presses in on your ears until you start to hear your own heartbeat. That I started in the main lobby, sweeping up debris, bagging old papers, and wiping down surfaces that hadn't seen a cloth in years. The work was mindless, almost soothing, and for a while, I forgot about the rules. I moved from room to room, following the map, checking off tasks as I went. The hospital was a maze of corridors and empty rooms, each one more decayed than the last. The children's ward was at the far end of the first floor, its door painted with faded balloons and smiling faces. I glanced at my watch, 11:15 p.m. Plenty of time that I worked quickly, stacking broken chairs, gathering scattered toys, and sweeping up glass. The silence was broken only by the sound of my own breathing and the occasional drip of water from a leaky ceiling. I finished just as the clock on my phone ticked over to 11:59. I closed the door behind me, the latch clicking into place, and felt a wave of relief. Rule 1 obeyed. I made my way back toward the main hall, passing the elevator. The doors were rusted shut, the call button dark. I kept moving, not even tempted to test it. The staff lounge was next, a small room with a couch, a table, and a vending machine that looked like it hadn't worked since the 90s. I wiped down the surfaces, emptied the trash, and checked the windows. All clear. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing down the hallway behind me. My heart hammered in my chest. I remembered Rule 2. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to look, to see who or what was there, but I forced myself to keep moving, eyes fixed on the door ahead. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they seemed to be right behind me. I reached the end of the hall, turned the corner, and the sound stopped. I waited, breath held, but there was nothing, just silence. I finished the rest of my tasks in a daze, nerves frayed, every shadow a threat. When I finally stepped outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten, the first hint of dawn on the horizon. I locked the door behind me, left the key and the envelope in the drop box as instructed, and drove home in silence. The money was in my account by noon. I told myself it was just nerves, the power of suggestion, the mind playing tricks in the dark. But the next night, the call came again. Same voice, same offer, same rules. This time, the job was at Mercy General, another abandoned hospital on the other side of town. The pattern repeated: envelope, key, map, rules. Always 6 rules, always typed in that same blocky font. Each hospital had its own set of rules, its own list of things to avoid, places not to go, things not to see. But the feeling was always the same, a sense of being watched, of not being alone, of something just out of sight. I started to keep a journal, writing down everything I saw, everything I heard, every strange occurrence. It helped, a little, to put it into words, to make it real. But some things defied explanation. At St. Augustine's, there was the children's ward. I never went back after midnight, but sometimes, as I passed by on my way out, I'd hear laughter, high, thin, and echoing, like the sound of children playing in a distant room. Once, I found a toy car in the middle of the hallway, its wheels spinning as if someone had just let go. I left it where it was. At Mercy General, the rules warned me never to use the elevator. One night, as I was cleaning the 3rd floor, I heard the bell ding, the doors sliding open with a metallic screech. I froze, heart pounding, as the lights inside flickered on and off. I backed away, never taking my eyes off the doors until they slid shut again. The next morning, the elevator was still rusted shut, the call button dead. The staff lounge at County Memorial was the worst. Rule 5. Do not answer if someone knocks on the staff lounge door. I was wiping down the table when I heard it, a soft, insistent knock. 3 times, then silence. I stood frozen, every muscle tense, as the knocking came again, louder this time. I didn't move, didn't breathe, until it stopped. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty, but the air was colder, and the lights flickered as I passed, and I started to notice patterns. The rules were always about avoidance. Don't look, don't listen, don't answer, don't go. It was as if the hospitals themselves were alive, testing the boundaries, seeing what I would do. The work became a ritual, a series of careful steps, each one designed to keep me safe. I learned to trust the rules, to follow them without question. They were the only thing standing between me and whatever waited in the dark. But the fear never went away. It became a constant companion, a low hum in the back of my mind. I stopped telling people where I worked, stopped answering questions about the bruises on my arms or the dark circles under my eyes. My friends drifted away, my family stopped calling. Even my cat seemed wary, watching me with wide, unblinking eyes when I came home in the morning. One night, at St. Augustine's, I broke a rule. It wasn't on purpose. I was tired, distracted, thinking about the rent due at the end of the month. I finished my tasks early and decided to check the children's ward one last time, just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. It was 12:03 a.m. The door was ajar, swinging gently on its hinges. The air inside was colder than the rest of the hospital, thick with the scent of old flowers and something metallic. My flashlight flickered as I stepped inside, the beam dancing across empty beds and scattered toys. The laughter was louder now, closer, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I pounded on the door, shouting, but there was no answer. The laughter grew louder, filling the room, until it was all I could hear. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears, eyes squeezed shut. When I opened them again, the room was empty, the door wide open, and my watch read 12:17 a.m. I stumbled out, heart racing, and didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air. I never went back to the children's ward after that. I never broke a rule again. The jobs kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. The rules grew stranger, more specific. At St. Mary's, I was told never to look in the mirrors after 2 a.m. At Riverside, I was warned not to speak to anyone I saw in the operating theater. At every hospital, there was a sense of unfinished business, of stories left untold, of mysteries that refused to die. I started to wonder who made the rules, who decided what was safe and what was forbidden. The envelopes never had a return address. The money always appeared like magic. I never saw another cleaner, never met the person who hired me. It was as if I was the only one left, the last witness to secrets that should have stayed buried. But the fear was real. The danger was real. And the rules were the only thing keeping me alive. There's a strange kind of comfort in routine, even when the routine is built on fear. I learned to move through the empty halls with purpose, to keep my eyes forward and my mind focused on the task at hand. The rules became second nature, a litany I repeated under my breath as I worked. Don't look, don't listen, don't answer, don't go. Each hospital had its own rhythm, its own set of dangers, but the feeling was always the same, a sense of being watched, of being tested, of walking a tightrope over a bottomless pit. Some nights, the fear was manageable, a background hum that faded as the hours passed. Other nights, it was suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides, making every shadow a threat and every sound a warning. I started to notice things I couldn't explain, doors that were open when I'd closed them, lights that flickered on in rooms I'd already cleaned, objects that moved from one place to another without a sound. I told myself it was just the building settling, the wind, the work of animals or vandals. But deep down, I knew better. The hospitals were alive in their own way, not with the pulse of human life, but with something older, something that lingered long after the last patient had left. The walls held memories, soaked up like water into plaster and tile. Every stain, every crack, every broken window was a scar, a reminder of what had happened here. And some of those memories didn't want to be forgotten. At Mercy General, there was a room on the 4th floor that was always cold, no matter how warm the rest of the building was. The rules didn't mention it, but I avoided it anyway. The door was heavy, the handle rusted, and the window was covered in a thick layer of grime. One night, as I passed by, I saw a handprint on the glass, small, like a child's, pressed into the dirt from the inside. I wiped it away, but the next night, it was back. Always the same size, always in the same place. At County Memorial, the operating theater was a place of silence. The rules were clear. Do not speak to anyone you see in the operating theater. I never saw anyone, not really, but sometimes, as I cleaned the glass, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the reflection, a figure in scrubs, face hidden behind a mask, hands moving in slow, deliberate motions. I never looked directly, never acknowledged what I saw. I finished my work and left as quickly as I could. The worst was St. Mary's. The mirrors there were old, the silver backing peeling away in jagged patterns. The rules said never to look in the mirrors after 2 a.m., and I obeyed. But one night, as I was cleaning the bathroom on the 2nd floor, I caught my reflection out of the corner of my eye. For a moment, I saw someone standing behind me, a woman in a hospital gown, her hair hanging in wet strands over her face. I spun around, but the room was empty. When I looked back, the mirror was cracked, a thin line running from top to bottom like a scar. I started to dread the calls, but I couldn't stop. The money was too good, and the work was all I had left. My world shrank to the size of those empty halls, my life measured in shifts and pay envelopes. I stopped answering texts, stopped returning calls. My friends faded into the background, their voices replaced by the whispers of the hospitals. Even my cat seemed to sense the change, keeping his distance, watching me with wary eyes. One night, I got a call for a new hospital, Riverside Asylum. The name alone sent a chill down my spine. The building had been abandoned for decades, its history a litany of tragedy and scandal. The rules were longer this time, more detailed, as if whoever wrote them knew the dangers were greater. Rule 1. Never enter the basement, no matter what you hear. Rule 2. If you see a patient in a striped gown, do not speak to them. Rule 3. The chapel is off limits after midnight. Rule 4. If you hear singing, cover your ears and leave the floor. Rule 5. Do not touch any medical equipment left in the hallways. Rule 6. Always leave by the front entrance. Never use the side doors. I arrived just before midnight, the air thick with fog and the scent of wet earth. The building loomed out of the darkness, its windows like empty eyes. The front doors were unlocked, swinging open with a groan that echoed down the empty corridors. I stepped inside, the rules clutched in my hand, and felt the weight of the place settle on my shoulders. The work was the same, sweeping, mopping, wiping down surfaces, but the atmosphere was different. The air was heavy, oppressive, as if the building itself was watching me. Every sound was amplified, every shadow stretched and twisted by the flickering light of my flashlight. I moved quickly, keeping to the main halls, avoiding the basement stairs and the chapel at the end of the east wing. As I worked, I heard things, soft footsteps in the distance, the faint sound of singing drifting up from the lower floors, the creak of doors opening and closing on their own. I kept my head down, focused on the task at hand, repeating the rules under my breath like a prayer. But the fear was always there, a constant presence just out of sight. Halfway through my shift, I saw him, a patient in a striped gown, standing at the end of the hallway, his face hidden in shadow. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with empty eyes. I remembered the rule and kept walking, never acknowledging his presence. When I looked back, he was gone. The worst moment came just before dawn. I was finishing up in the main lobby when I heard singing, soft, mournful, echoing up from the basement. The sound was beautiful and terrible, a lullaby that made my skin crawl. I covered my ears, as the rules instructed, and hurried to the front entrance. The singing grew louder, more insistent, until it was all I could hear. I stumbled outside, gasping for air, the sound fading as the door slammed shut behind me. That I sat in my car for a long time, hands shaking, heart racing. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I told myself I was done, that I'd never go back. But when the next call came, I answered. The jobs became a blur, each one blending into the next. The rules grew stranger, more specific, as if the hospitals were evolving, adapting to my presence. I started to see patterns, certain numbers repeated, certain names appearing in the logs, certain rooms always colder than the rest. I began to suspect that the rules weren't just for my safety, but for the safety of whatever lingered in those halls. One night, at St. Augustine's, I found a notebook in the staff lounge. The cover was faded, the pages yellowed with age. Inside, someone had written their own set of rules in shaky handwriting. 1. Never trust the mirrors. 2. The children's laughter means someone is missing. 3. If you find a key, do not use it. 4. The elevator only goes down. 5. The staff lounge is never empty, even when it looks that way. 6. If you see your own reflection wave, leave immediately. I read the rules over and over, trying to make sense of them. Some matched my own experiences. Others hinted at dangers I hadn't yet encountered. I wondered who had written them and what had happened to them. The last page was torn, the final words smudged and unreadable, that I started to keep my own list, adding new rules as I learned them. Some were simple: never work alone, always carry extra batteries, never ignore a gut feeling. Others were more cryptic: don't whistle, don't run, don't ever say your name out loud. The rules became a lifeline, a way to impose order on chaos, to make sense of the senseless. But the mysteries remained. Every hospital had its secrets, its unsolved cases, its lingering ghosts. I started to dig, searching old records, newspaper clippings, online forums. I found stories of patients who vanished without a trace, doctors who went mad, nurses who saw things they couldn't explain. I found photos of empty rooms, with shadows that didn't belong, and reports of strange lights and unexplained noises. The deeper I looked, the more I realized that the hospitals were connected, not just by their architecture or their history, but by something deeper, something older. The same symbols appeared in different buildings, carved into door frames or scratched into the walls. The same names appeared in patient logs, decades apart. The same rules, always 6, always typed in that same blocky font. I started to wonder if I was being watched, not just by the hospitals, but by something else, something that wanted me to keep coming back, to keep following the rules, to keep the secrets safe. The fear became a part of me, a constant companion, but so did the curiosity. I wanted to know the truth, even if it meant risking everything. One night, at County Memorial, I broke another rule. I was cleaning the staff lounge when I heard a knock at the door, soft, insistent, 3 times, then silence. I knew I shouldn't answer, but something compelled me. I opened the door, and for a moment, I saw her, a nurse in a white uniform, her face pale and eyes hollow. She reached out, her hand cold as ice, and whispered my name. That I stumbled back, heart racing, and the door slammed shut. When I looked again, the hallway was empty, but the air was colder, and the lights flickered as I passed. I finished my shift in a daze, the nurse's voice echoing in my mind. After that night, the rules changed. The next envelope contained a new list, with a 7th rule, handwritten at the bottom. Rule 7. If you break a rule, you must make amends before leaving. I didn't know what that meant, but I wasn't about to find out. I followed the rules to the letter, never straying, never questioning. The fear was real, and so were the consequences. But the mysteries remained, unsolved and unyielding. The hospitals were alive, their secrets buried deep, their dangers ever present. And I was just a witness, a caretaker, a keeper of the rules. That I wish I could say I found answers. That after all those nights, all those rules, all those close calls, I finally understood what was happening in those abandoned hospitals. But the truth is, the more I learned, the less I knew. The mysteries only deepened, the questions multiplied, and the fear, if anything, grew sharper, more personal. I started to notice changes in myself. At first, it was just the exhaustion, the way my hands shook when I tried to hold a cup of coffee, the way my eyes darted to every shadow, every reflection. But then it became something else. I'd wake up in the middle of the day, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard footsteps in my apartment. I'd find objects moved, doors left ajar, my cat hiding under the bed, his fur bristled and eyes wide. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and for a split second, I'd swear my reflection was just a beat behind. I tried to quit. I really did. I ignored the next call, let it ring until it went to voicemail. But the silence that followed was worse than the fear. I felt untethered, like I was floating outside my own life. The world outside the hospitals felt thin, insubstantial, as if I was only half there. When the call came again, I answered without thinking, relief and dread mixing in my chest. The next job was at a place I'd never heard of, St. Helena's Infirmary, a squat, windowless building on the outskirts of town. The envelope was waiting for me on the front steps, the rules inside, typed as always, but this time there was a note at the bottom, handwritten in shaky script. You're not alone. I almost turned back. But I'd come this far, and the need for answers, any answers, was stronger than my fear. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. St. Helena's was different from the others. The air was thick, almost humid, and the walls seemed to close in around me as I moved through the halls. The rules were familiar, but there was an urgency to them, a sense that the danger here was more immediate, more personal. Rule 1. Never enter the morgue after 3 a.m. Rule 2. If you hear your name whispered, do not respond. Rule 3. The lights in the East Wing will flicker at 2:17 a.m. Do not be in the East Wing at that time. Rule 4. If you find a door that wasn't there before, do not open it. Rule 5. If you see someone you know, leave immediately. Rule 6. Always leave a coin on the front desk before you go. I moved through the building, my senses on high alert. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow deeper. I kept to the main halls, avoiding the East Wing, the morgue, and any door that looked out of place. I finished my tasks quickly, barely pausing to catch my breath. But as the night wore on, the building seemed to shift around me. Hallways stretched longer than they should. Doors appeared where there had been only blank walls, and the air grew colder, heavier. I heard my name whispered, soft and urgent, echoing down the empty corridors. I clenched my jaw and kept moving, refusing to answer, refusing to look back. At 2:17 a.m., the lights in the East Wing began to flicker, casting long, stuttering shadows across the floor. I was on the opposite side of the building, but I could feel the pull, the sense that something was waiting for me in the darkness. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding, and waited for the lights to steady. When I finally finished, I made my way to the front desk, pulled a coin from my pocket, and placed it on the dusty surface. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, a figure standing at the end of the hall, just out of reach of the light. I didn't look back. I walked out into the night, the door slamming shut behind me. That was the last job I took. I told myself I was done, that I'd had enough, that I'd survived what others hadn't. But the fear followed me home, a shadow that clung to my heels. I started to see things out of the corner of my eye, shapes moving in the darkness, reflections that didn't quite match, whispers that faded as soon as I tried to listen. My cat disappeared one day, the door left open when I was sure I'd locked it. I searched for hours, calling his name, but he never came back. I tried to go back to a normal life, but the world outside felt wrong, as if I'd crossed some invisible line and couldn't return. I started to write down everything I remembered, every rule, every strange occurrence, every unanswered question. The notebook grew thick with entries, the pages filled with warnings and observations, sketches of symbols I'd seen carved into walls, lists of names that recurred in patient logs and staff rosters. I started to notice connections, dates that lined up, events that repeated, patterns that emerged only when I looked at the big picture. The hospitals weren't just haunted, they were connected, part of a network of places where the boundaries between worlds were thin, where the past bled into the present, where the rules were the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. I reached out to others, online forums, message boards, anonymous chat rooms. I found people with stories like mine, people who'd worked in abandoned hospitals, who'd followed the rules, who'd seen things they couldn't explain. Some had vanished, their accounts deleted, their posts replaced with warnings. Others shared their own rules, their own lists of things to avoid, places not to go, things not to see. That we started to piece together a map, a web of locations, each with its own set of dangers, its own set of rules. The same symbols appeared again and again, the same names, the same warnings. It was as if the hospitals were communicating, sharing information, adapting to our presence. But the mysteries remained. Who wrote the rules? Who enforced them? What happened to those who broke them? And what, exactly, were we protecting ourselves from? One night, I got a message from someone calling themselves Caretaker. The message was simple: you're getting too close. Some doors should stay closed. Attached was a photo, a grainy image of me, taken from behind, as I entered St. Helena's. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and realized I was being watched, not just by the hospitals, but by someone, or something, else that I stopped posting after that. I changed my number, moved to a new apartment, tried to disappear, but the fear never left. I still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I hear footsteps in the hallway, whispers in the dark. I still see things out of the corner of my eye, reflections that don't quite match, shadows that move when they shouldn't. Sometimes, I think about going back, about taking one more job, just to see if I can find the answers I'm looking for. But then I remember the rules, the warnings, the faces of those who didn't make it out. I remember the feeling of being watched, of being tested, of walking a tightrope over a bottomless pit. I keep the notebook close, just in case. I add new rules as I think of them, new warnings, new observations. I tell myself it's just a precaution, just a way to keep the fear at bay. But deep down, I know the truth. The mysteries of those abandoned hospitals will never be solved, not completely. The fear is real, and it's not going anywhere. If you ever find yourself standing in front of an abandoned hospital, envelope in hand, rules typed in blocky font, I have only one piece of advice: follow the rules. Don't ask questions. Don't look back. And if you hear your name whispered in the dark, keep walking. Because some mysteries are better left unsolved.